No, of course your health is serious. The reason I did this was to make people take the right thing seriously and give you tools to see what isn't going to help you. A lot of people stand to profit off you taking the wrong things really seriously. So I'm just trying to cut through those narratives. Welcome back to the show. I am so excited for today's episode. So I have a guest on today that is so incredibly knowledgeable. And I reached out to her because she shared so many things on Instagram and otherwise that I just really feel align with a lot of the things I preach. But I also feel like she has an expertise in it that I can't bring. That is my favorite type of guest. I would love people that can expand upon things that align with me, but know way more about them. I think that's the coolest thing ever. I wanted to have someone on who's a health practitioner, really someone that could give you guys the tools to not only assess your own health and environments, but also understand some of the symptoms that are so incredibly common. She's all about healing the body instead of fighting against it with the many things that a lot of us experience. And I'm a very firm believer that just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal or okay. Without kind of going off on a tangent about how great she is, I want to get right into it because this episode is packed. So here we go. Please welcome to the show, integrative health practitioner, Taylor Sappington. Hello, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for reaching out. I want to use you as an example because Instagram can be such a beautiful tool of connection. The answer is always no if you don't ask for something. So thank you for asking me to be on the show. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and connect to not only you, but your audience. I'm so happy to be here. It's my pleasure.
Oh, that makes me so happy. The first thing that I want to get into is you have an incredible story of overcoming a childhood of really extensive health issues and just reactions. And it seemed to have really followed you all through your young life. And if you guys want to hear this whole story, Taylor has an incredible podcast. It's called Toxins. It will be linked below. However, I'd like to hear from you sort of an overview of what that looked like, and specifically in your 20s, how you began to finally break ground on a lot of the symptoms and conditions that you were experiencing.
Obviously, I went to school to be a dietitian, and a lot of the passion behind that was, I was like, oh my God, we can use this beautiful thing that Mother Nature has gifted us to create impactful change. Unfortunately, perception is not always reality, right? And in going through all of my own training, be it undergrad, fellowship, working in hospital systems for 8+ years, right? I came to understand that while the conventional paradigm is incredible for treating acute and trauma-based injury, it does not serve the chronic illness that we are seeing in terms of growth in epidemic proportions in the population, right? And I fell into that. I was one of those chronically ill patients that felt failed by the conventional paradigm. So I had everything from irritable bowel syndrome to irritable bowel disease to hypothyroidism to Hashimoto's. And it was just this merry-go-round of being seen by practitioners where everyone seemingly had the same thing to say. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, okay, different face, same message, not getting any further from the point with which I started. It's time to pivot. I have this incredible tool of food. I was using it. I was implementing it. I think the worst thing that I heard from almost every conventionally trained practitioner was just change what you're eating and move a little bit more when that's the last thing my body actually needed. So when I came to this realization that I wasn't going to get to where I needed to go and my symptoms were getting worse, I realized it was time to pivot. But it was an accumulation of things. My story wasn't just like one precipice of, an event. It was multiple events that just stacked on each other. So obviously, if you listen to the podcast that I put out, I was a vaccine injured kid. I didn't come to learn that until later on in life. I had multiple sinus infections, ear infections, yeast infections as a small child, lots of antibiotic use early on in life. There seemed to be this time in my life where everything calmed down, or I was just not aware of what was going on in my body. And then I obviously got into my 20s and I was like, oh, okay. I started competing. That was really the triggering event. I started to do fitness and figure. Obviously, we all know if we pay attention to that industry, or we've been there, things change dramatically in terms of sleep and caloric intake, even food intake and the type of food that you're consuming, energy-based output. it rocked my world, to say the least. It was very cool to watch myself manipulate my body. That's the best word to use. And the response that I got. But eventually I hit a wall like many of us do. And that's when my thyroid started to fail. My GI tract started to really fail. My menstrual cycle started to fail. And I went back to the same conventional paradigm, right, that I was speaking to earlier and wasn't getting anywhere. And I discovered a naturopathic doctor, right? So it wasn't one event that really paints the picture of what my story is. It was multiple events that look like that. It's almost like I didn't learn my lesson the first time. I made it through Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism to identifying that it was a gut-based issue. And then I got breast implants. Hello, that was a really poor choice on my behalf. I can say that reflectively. So I got breast implants. Obviously, I didn't know that that was an issue. Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia set in a year later. I didn't make the connection until later on in life. Lyme obviously set me on my rear end, and then finally mold and mycotoxicity. But all of these were separate events, and each event led me further down the path of discovering what medicine meant to me. And medicine was not going back and getting prescriptions after prescriptions filled. Medicine was getting to know the point or the root cause, I should say, the point of origin or root cause of these symptoms. What was driving all this dysfunction? Why was my body so upset? And how could I really reconnect with her in order to create a lifestyle that served and supported her, in terms of thriving? That's a sort of an abbreviated version. There's a lot of small details that go in there, from pregnancy to postpartum depression to, it wasn't one event. It was an accumulation of multiple events that continued to lead me down the path of discovering what was really going to help me get out of the hole that I was digging myself. I was fully responsible for that. And that's the other thing too, that I think most people have a hard time wrapping their mind around of. We have to realize that we are the root cause. We are the commonality in all the things presenting in our life. And when we take responsibility for that, we can get the help that we're seeking or that we want, we desire, and thus the change.
I love the way that you phrase that, just because I think it sounds almost mean to be like, well, you're your problem. I think when people hear something like that, it's like you're to blame for not knowing what to do. And that's not what it is at all. No one is going to fix it for you. And I think you probably learned that better than most people. With that, the main thing I want to talk to you about was that toxicity. And I feel like, especially me on this show, I denounce like cleanses and detoxes and all of these things. And I think there's a lot of value in knowing how your body actually detoxes itself and what can happen when the systems that do rid these toxins aren't quite working as well as they should. And I'd like to start by asking you to explain how it cleanses with random Instagram companies versus what is the actual detoxification with a health practitioner? How does it differ? And is that something that everybody should be doing to at least some extent? Or are there certain things that everybody should be doing at least to some extent? What's your take on that?
So let's unpack the cleanses that are sold en masse on places and platforms like Instagram, right? So we have like skinny tea. That's one that we can all relate to. We've seen the ads. We know the pretty people that show up in those pictures. A lot of women desire to look a certain way. Let's just face it, there's been this pressure imposed upon women in society, and perhaps men too. We just don't hear about it that frequently. And I work primarily with women, so I can speak to that. But there's this expectation that we should look a certain way, right? In order to be found attractive and desirable. And a lot of these companies appeal to that through marketing. Obviously, behind marketing is psychology. What works for these things is their marketing. From the words that they use, to the colors that they use, to the branding that they use, to the people that they handpick to go in their ads. That's the first point of what works with these skinny teas for all intents and purposes, these detoxes, right? Outside of that, nothing about what they are works. They utilize what is considered to be quick fixes that are oftentimes extremely detrimental to the physiology of the body, right? One commonly used ingredient across the board is called senna. It's an herbal component, right? It has habit-forming potential, especially for the bowels. And what ends up happening is we do see a release. We see, weight loss in terms of water weight. We see release of bowel movements, which most people, let's face it, most people don't go to the bathroom as frequently as they should. Most people don't have healthy and normal bowel movements. Insert skinny tea, we're going to not only see water weight loss, we're going to see weight loss through the form of bowel movements because we have loose stool on these things. They're not pleasant. Most of the time you talk to somebody who's been through, a detox with a skinny tea and they're like, it sucked. It was horrible. but it did the trick. My question is always, how sustainable was it? The weight that you lost, did you gain it back? Do you feel any better for doing it? Or was it just in the moment, I felt wonderful, and after the fact, I felt horrible? Right? So the reality of it is there's not much that works about these quick fixes. Anything worth having, it's not going to be quick, it's not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be easy. And that's where we really get to unpack what detoxing with a practitioner looks like. But in regards to these quick fixes, I want to encourage everyone to take time to read labels. If you don't know what's in your skinny tea, for example, don't take it. Make sure you work with someone to ensure that there's no contraindications with medication, or you're not on some other formal, herbal formulation, pardon me, where there's going to be interactions that are not going to serve and support you. But the reality of it is there's nothing that works about them outside of marketing, outside of appeal, and outside of water weight loss, which is not long-term, nor is it sustainable. Did we unpack that? Is there anything else that we could unpack there?
No, I think that was perfect. And I've talked a lot about water weight, and I even put up a video on YouTube when I was competing in weightlifting, and it was a weight class sport. And I did a video on my water cut. I must have said in the video 10 times, this is not weight loss. This is water weight loss. This is not something you should do and expect anything to stick around. When I finished that water cut, I was up 12 pounds on the scale the next day, because obviously sport and extreme sport is not health. They're not conducive, and they're not the same thing. That was not my goal. My goal was to compete in a weight class, and that was what I wanted to do. And I did that. But I also was very expecting and understanding of the consequence and how to take care of myself in the event that something did go wrong. With that being said, I think probably at least 10 comments under that video are, I'm going to try this before my beach vacation, or I'm going to do this. I think that people, like you said, they are like, it was working at the time. And I'm like, no, if you gain all the weight back, or you feel like garbage, or that's not what working is. That's not the same thing. So I think you did an amazing job of covering that. And I'm even more excited to hear about what you have to say about what real cleansing and real detoxing, or whatever term that you like to use, what does that look like? And how is that something that people can implement or seek out help with? And how do you know if you're someone that really may need something like this?
Yeah. So the first question I always like to ask those who are seeking to do any sort of detox, I like the word reset, because detox and cleanse has such a negative connotation to it, but I understand why it's utilized. So when it comes to somebody who's seeking to do a detox or a cleanse, I always want to know the why behind it. Why are you seeking to do this? What is your goal? Be it short-term or long-term. I think we live in a society of instant gratification without the full understanding that it takes 7 to 10 years for an underlying condition to physically manifest. So your body spends 7 to 10 years compensating and compensating and compensating. And then it finally hits a wall and it goes, hey T, I can't compensate anymore. Here are all the symptoms, to get your attention, to show you that I am compensating, right? We always want to shoot the messenger in terms of symptoms, when in reality, that's the only means of communication your body has to get your attention. And it's like that analogy that so many people use. Is it going to be whisper or the scream, stone or the brick? Oftentimes in our society, we require the scream or we require the brick, right? We don't pay attention. We have spent our entire lives being desensitized to our body's needs and disconnected from our body's needs. And I also think there is this lack of awareness or lack of general understanding that we are one big chemistry project. And when one minor constituent in that chemistry project steps to the right, everything in the body follows. It's not that we're going to impact one system and everything else is going to stay the same. If one system goes dysfunctional, all systems compensate in an attempt to keep you healthy, but also go dysfunctional to a certain degree. So I always want to have a general understanding of why somebody is wanting to move into a detox. If you're seeking to quickly lose weight, you're going to disappoint yourself in the long run. Weight is just a symptom. And I think that is also lost on a lot of people too. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done the proper, food combinations or intake or movement. It may mean that your body is incapable of responding metabolically. And that's where reset comes in. So when it comes to functionally detoxing with a practitioner, which again, I like to say reset because we remove that connotation. Could everybody benefit from it? Absolutely. But as I say in my community, we have this beautiful framework to work with, but that framework doesn't mean that we're going to be, tied to it the entire time. Everybody's body has different needs. And I can tell you from experience, each person I pace through under supervision, and I think it's really important to work with someone so that you have that sounding board, so that you can ask questions, so that you can gain a deeper understanding of why you're doing and what you're using in order to get to where you want to go. But, everyone that I work with, we eventually end up modifying that initial reset and the way that it works or looks in order to meet their bio-individual needs. So I'm sure you've worked with women, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that have worked with people in the health, wellness, and fitness space who are like, I just cannot get rid of this last 5 to 10 pounds. I just want to lose 15 pounds. God, this last 20 pounds is just a thorn in my side. And we go after the weight, right? And there is a lot of truth to a lot of people overestimate and underconsume. We are a society of deficit, right? When it comes to food, at least. Or we're eating things that don't serve and support us. Or we're not sleeping appropriately. I mean, we could talk about a long list of lifestyle factors that contribute to this. But what is oftentimes unknown, because we're not taught this stuff, is that extra weight is more than likely inflammation. So what ends up happening is when our body is not primed to detoxify optimally, it will compensate until it can no longer compensate. So a lot of the times we see suboptimal detoxification capacity. Okay. So when we are not optimally offloading toxins from our inner ecosystem, our body knows that we will go septic if it doesn't, again, compensate. So what ends up happening is the things that are not offloaded through detoxification, and your liver is your primary organ of detoxification. You also have the kidneys and the lungs and the skin, but your liver is your primary organ of detoxification. If your body is not capable of moving things through the liver efficiently because it's lacking the availability of resources to do so, and we'll talk about that, things end up back in circulation and your body goes, oh no, this is not going to work for us. I can't let Taylor go septic. So it takes these toxic entities and it shuttles them into adipose tissue. And that adipose tissue becomes this storage house for toxins. Great. Blood has taken care of the problem. Body has gotten toxins out of circulation. But on the back end of this, your adipose tissue that is now a warehouse for toxins becomes inflamed. And on top of becoming inflamed, it begins to produce something called aromatase. So not only do we see inflammation and toxic water weight, we also see an estrogen mimicking impact on the body. And this is where a lot of the weight gain comes from. So it doesn't matter how low you go on caloric intake. It doesn't matter how many hours you spend in the gym. Those two things are probably going to end up just like fanning the fire that's going on internally, right? The problem is the point of origin, the liver, is not feeling supported. Thus, it can't do its job efficiently. And the additional weight is where we're seeing our body compensate to make sure that we are protected from internal toxicity.
Yes, that was beautiful. Oh my gosh, I want like a poster of like that. I love everything you just said. And there's one big thing that I think is a really big misunderstanding. And I've talked about it briefly before, but I don't know that I've ever really gone into it. Calories, calorie deficit, calories are king, all of those things. And we know that, right? But I think what people maybe overlook is that your body burns calories according to how safe it feels. So if there is something going on, there is things being stored and they're not being excreted, your body then cuts that down. It's very comparable to people that do maybe figure compete or people that are chronically in weight class sports that are way below where they typically sit. People that are really often most of the year in a deficit, your body doesn't just continue to burn. That's not what happens. Instead, the body adapts to where you're at. Exactly. So all of a sudden we see things like sex drive, or we see things like our skin get dull or our hair get thin, things that the body deems non-essential functions, right? Those go away because those quote unquote cost the body calories. So those things go away. But when we're dealing with something that is a toxin, this is something that's within the body that the body cannot get out, that is a reaction just in the same way as, you purposely putting yourself into a deficit. This just isn't something that maybe people are aware of. And I think that's what makes it scary, because a lot of the times, especially now, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, but there's a lot of good health people out there and putting out content. And we hear all the time, you can't diet all the time and you can't do this and you can't stay in a deficit forever because this, and this happens. But I think the side of hormone health somewhat can get bastardized is a strong word, but in a way, because people will put the blame on it as if there's nothing anybody can do. And they say, no, it's just my hormones or my insulin or this or that. But it's not, it's my hormones. I think something is off. I'm going to go get testing and then I'm going to take these steps. It's, I'm fucked. My hormones are off. I will never lose this weight. I am meant to feel or look or whatever this way. And I think because you took those extra steps, that can now encourage others that there is more. That's not the end. That's not the wall that stops everything. There's more than that. You can go behind the wall, even if that is the reasoning.
Yeah. Well, and nobody's coming to save you. I don't know how else to put it. Like, your body is your responsibility. And we're hearing that a lot today, but it's always been true and will continue to be true. You have to take a vested interest in the vessel that you call home. So many people look at it as a cost. Right. And this is just a minor tangent I'm going to go on. Right. But so many people look at testing and supplements and working with someone as a cost. But I'm like, no. It is a cost to buy a coffee from Starbucks every day, because the return on investment is temporary. It's like in the moment enjoyment. And I'm not saying that's not important. When we zoom out and we look at life on a much broader spectrum, if you invest in your health, if you invest in testing, if you invest in the proper supplementation that is strategically integrated, if you invest in working with someone to build your toolkit so that in 10 years from now, you're still pulling from that toolkit, you've essentially advocated and empowered yourself in a way that people are choosing to forego. It is not a cost that has no return on investment. It is an investment that will pay dividends for the rest of your life, to get to know your body, to get to know the language that it speaks, and to learn how to interpret it. And that's so very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my next question is to you. What is your recommendation as far as, okay, so I've had really bad skin my whole life, or I do feel like I really am doing the correct things and I'm working with a coach or a nutritionist or a dietitian that has me tracking my food and I'm weighing everything. And I think I might have that problem where I'm holding on to weight because of inflammation. What is step one and where do you go from there?
So it's interesting, right? Because sex hormones, you were talking about them earlier, they get a really bad rap, right? I'm like, oh God, sex hormones get blamed for everything, just like everybody thinks that they have a bacterial overgrowth. When in reality, if you do the proper testing, you get to see that bacteria 9 times out of 10 isn't the problem, fungus is. And fungus is opportunistic, just like certain strains of bacteria, part of the ecosystem, but stress, chronic stress will cause overgrowth. But hormones, right? Sex hormones are a luxury to an optimally functioning body. And if you have dysregulation in sex hormones, it is time to reverse engineer that problem, because that is the last step in a long cascade that got you to the dysfunction. Simple steps that people can integrate or implement is simply journaling or documenting your symptoms, right? Like, keep a notebook of the things that you're experiencing, how frequently you're experiencing them, the intensity of with you're experiencing all of these, right? Because that's going to help when you finally choose to invest in yourself and your health and work with someone. But other things that people can do in order to start addressing things, ask yourself simple questions. Is the food I'm eating easy to recognize and sourced by Mother Nature, right? Like, is it whole foods? There's this whole movement about balance, right? But what I've come to find is a lot of people are just looking for a permission slip to go back to bad habits. And in reality, the balance is making sure that you're giving your body what it needs. Your body's job is to take what you feed it and then utilize it to support you. Look at what you eat. Where is it sourced? What are the ingredients list, right? Look at what you're drinking and showering in, right? Is it filtered water? Are you reinfusing with electrolytes? Because if you're not actually hydrating yourself. How about your sleep? Are you going to bed at a good time? That cortisol, the hormones we were talking about, right? That cortisol level hits its lowest point at 9:30 at night. So if you're scrolling social media until 11:30, you're probably not going to get to bed until 12:30, right? And that production of melatonin is not going to be healthy because cortisol and melatonin have this inverse relationship. So look at your sleep hygiene. So food, water, sleep, sunshine, fresh air, movement that's nourishing for the nervous system, getting your feet without shoes, yes, I said it, onto the ground, connecting with your community and tribe. I mean, there's so much free medicine available to us. We're taught to complicate things. And those are places that you can start without oversight and without guidance, right? And once you've started to integrate the foundations and the basics, watch how symptoms change. And if you still have some repetition, then it's time to go, I need further guidance. I need a little bit more insight. I just need to be poured into. Really, it's more about allowing someone to pour into your cup. Like, I need to be guided. I need to be led. I need to be taught. And then finding a person that resonates with you and doing that through functional testing, through moving through the protocol that we were talking about earlier in terms of detoxification. So I always recommend everybody start with the free medicine.
I say it to my clients all the time, and I think they think that I'm sort of joking, but I'm not at all,
No.
is that if I could become doctor of the world and I could prescribe one thing to everybody, it would be a 10-minute walk while the sun is out.
Yes.
Or even better, directly after a meal. Go
Yes.
for a walk and just no phone, no crazy children like pulling your hair one way and like your purse in the other direction. Breathing and looking around and genuinely being there and taking deep belly breaths, not breathing into your chest, filling your belly with air, a longer exhale than you do an inhale, really actually being. And so many people say, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And I'm like, then you need to do it for double the time. That is something I totally stole from my partner. He's like, at the end of class, when we kind of do our classes in our gym, they're group classes, we do and pretty intense exercise it sometimes. Sometimes it's not, but on the days we do, we have everyone lie down or put their feet up against the wall. And we say, okay, we're going to do a guided breathing type exercise. Anybody who feels that this is way too much or you have somewhere to be, you're going to stay for double the time. Yep. Congratulations. Raise your hand.
Probably the whole class.
Exactly. Right. And especially I work with CrossFitters and I have said it once, I'll say it again. If you like feel the need to flip a tire at 5 a.m., you probably do need to take a breath. And that's all of us. And it's okay because we're all very type A and that's what attracts us to it. But we also have to realize what we're doing. And in situations when we did open the gym, that's the most stressed out I've ever been in my life. I've never been stressed like that. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, I was not responding to intense exercise. My face was so puffy. My skin was a mess. I couldn't fall asleep. And I would be up legitimately all night. And then all day, I would feel like I'm going to fall asleep standing up. It was disastrous. And I had to not only decrease the intensity of which I was exercising, I had to address a lot of things, but we were opening a business, but it was finite, right? I was like, okay, we're going to kind of get through this. I'm not doing well right now, but I'm going to fix the things I can, which is the intensity of my exercise, my sleep hygiene, things like that. And then this is going to be a stressful time. You cannot live your life like that and then expect to feel and look and be okay because something's going to break eventually. You can't be on something for years and years and years, decades and decades, and expect everything to go well. And I think that the free medicine side of it is amazing. And then once you do those things, and you do have those foundations down, for example, I feel I live a fairly healthy life. I do my best. And I really do have a lot of the foundations down, if I do say so myself. I still had some skin issues. I've never really had great skin and I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, well, I don't drink as much water as I should. Or like I was in college, so I was still drinking and I don't drink now. And then that went away and I was like, okay, well, it's still not great. It's still not great. It's still not great. Everything else feels good. Then I went through testing and lo and behold, I have like less than none testosterone. And lo and behold, when I've started adding things in and some herbal supplementation and just general lifestyle factors to support that, all of a sudden my skin is clearing up. And is it perfect? No, but it also took me quite a long time and quite a few tests to get there. That patience is so key because if I just went, oh, this is so annoying, I can't deal with this, you never reap those benefits. And you kind of, I feel, owe it to yourself to live in a way where you actually do feel good and that you do know what's going on with your body. Because it's like you said, you only get one.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because so many people say, well, how long did it take you? I've been doing this work for over 8 years, and I've been solidly rooted in where I am for really the last 2, but it took me 4.5 years to find a solid foundation, of what I needed to implement, what I needed to pivot in terms of lifestyle, right? And what my cadence was going to look like after this. This is never ending for me, and a lot of people find that to be so like exasperating to them. Like, oh my God, this is forever. And I'm like, yes, but it gets easier. It's layers of an onion, and you peel a layer back and then you have another layer. And if you take a childlike curiosity in terms of your approach, it's fun. It's so fun to get to know your body. It's so fun to dive into, most of the time, your past, right? But so many people forget that what happened 10, 15 years ago completely determines what you do now. So I'm 35, right? What I do now will determine how I am at 55. And more people would be a lot healthier if they understood that everything that they do is all about building for the next decade, building for the next, 2 decades. Do I want to be in a place and space at 55 where I'm at 35? Hell yes, I want to be as vital and as zestfully excited about life, so it's a building process. So to your point, this takes time. And it takes patience, and you owe it to yourself. It's an obligation of yours to be the best version of who you are. Because when we choose to show up then in a lesser form of the best version of ourselves, we are not only short selling ourselves, we're short selling our family, we're short selling society. There are people out there that need your gifts. And if you can't show up in the highest version of who you are, you're not going to be able to offer those gifts. It's your obligation to be your happiest, healthiest version of who you are meant to be. Like, it's your obligation to not only yourself, but to everybody that you've impacted in your life currently and who you're meant to impact in the future. Like, it's your obligation.
Right. Yeah. And like you sort of mentioned it earlier, there is this trend of, at least some of what I've seen on social media, a lot of it is mental health. And I'm not going to pretend to know what the worst ever mental health feels like, because everyone has their struggles, but there are some really serious things going on in the world. And a lot of people aren't handling that well. And what I sort of do hate to see encouraged is like, if you need to stay in bed for a week and like not brush your teeth and not do this, like, that's fine. You do it. And it's like, you can't do that and expect to feel better. Like,
you can't avoid life.
Your teeth. Right. You can't not brush your teeth for a week, because then things are going to go wrong there. And then you're going to have to go to the dentist and get it fixed. And that's going to add stress. You cannot pile on stress just to avoid it right now. You have to think long term, and you could die tomorrow, but you're going to assume that you're not going to, because a lot of us hopefully won't die tomorrow. And if you're just trying to get through the day every day, that's no way to live. And I think looking forward to the future is human nature, and you should be living as if there is no tomorrow every day, not in the sense of recklessness or I'm not going to do anything and I'm going to do whatever. Live like there's no tomorrow. Like, this is your last day to make it as good as you can. And obviously we all have our days. Let's not sit here and pretend that I'm not, on the couch on a Sunday after a really, really hard week and just like basically face down and like trying to survive. Like, everyone has those days, and that's okay, but it has to be the day, and you have to accept that for what it is. No guilt, no shame, but you have to move on. You have to take that next step. Always. And if you can just take one step forward every single day, you're going to get pretty freaking far. And I think people underestimate that. The 1%ers, oh my God, do they add up? And what are some 1%ers that you kind of recommend aside from the foundational things like getting sunshine and sleep and just good quality food? What are the 1%ers that you think a lot of people may be missing out on?
It's behavioral, right? So like, if we want to talk about digestive health and detoxification, I mean, that's an easy place to go. So I think therapy is incredible, right? Regardless of what form of therapy you use, I think journaling is amazing. I think breath work is amazing. But if we're talking about actionable steps that people can take, you talked about going on a walk, right? And doing it for double if you don't want to do the walk and be quiet with yourself. Man, you can learn a lot about yourself on a quiet walk, right? You can also learn a lot about how the trees connect with one another, and how the blades of grass move. Life is really cool when you allow yourself to slow down with it. So slow down, obviously, would be on there. But like, let's talk about what happens in the kitchen. Cephalic phase of digestion, Is everybody engaging in making memories in the kitchen or making food out of a place and space of love? There is the cephalic phase of digestion. Being intentionally aware and intentional with what you do in the kitchen is huge, and all of us can do that. It's free. On top of the things that we've talked about, pay attention, be in the moment, be present, right? I have kids, I get it. I have 2 dogs, a husband, like we're busy, I understand. But we do make it a point to make meals focal point for us, where we sit down and we connect not only with our plate, but with each other. So engage in creating meals from a place of love. That is going to enhance your digestion probably better than anything that I could give you supplementally. Make sure you breathe, right? So you talked about breathing, but not from the chest, from the belly. You'd be shocked at how many people can't do that because of compensation based on stress. How many of us live our life with, our shoulders and our ears uncomfortably? That's going to obstruct your airway. It's going to prevent you from getting that deep diaphragmatic breathing because all your intercostals are tangled up or rolled up like a rag. So being intentional with the way with which you engage with your breath. Breath is life. It's prana. It's energy. So being intentionally aware with your breath. And if you cannot take a deep diaphragmatic breath, hello, girlfriend, I was there for a long time. Find somebody that can help you get there. Visceral massage can go a very long way. Making sure that you give gratitude. I know it is so cliche to say the attitude of gratitude, but by God, it goes really, really far when it comes to just about everything in life. When it comes to sitting down, do you thank your plate? That's huge. Thank the farmer, even if it came out of your garden. Thank yourself for growing it. Thank Mother Nature for working with you. Are you working with her? Make sure you thank the person that cooked the meal. Thank the animal that gave its life so that you could nourish yours. That's big. It creates connection. It creates connection with what we deem as inanimate, but there's nothing inanimate about what's on our plate. It is quite literally life force for us. Chew your food to a paste. So many people, this blows their mind, but I'm like, I need you to chew 20 to 30 times. Put your fork down, slow down. If I were to pull something out of your mouth, I shouldn't be able to recognize it. Yes, chew your food. And then there's a 5th one, and it is, I am losing it right now, so I will circle back around to it, or a 6th one. But there are staples that I highly recommend when it comes to making sure, checking your toilet for your bowel movements too. How many people get up and they're like, ew. I'm like, that is your body. That is your body. That is a byproduct of your body. Get familiar with your bowel movements. How often do you go to the bathroom? If you're going to the bathroom, meaning pee, when you wake up, and then maybe once in the middle of the day and once before you go to bed, are you hydrated? Probably not. So there's all these minor behavioral changes in terms of lifestyle that we can make that aren't so minor. Minor can be majorly impactful when we become intentional with the way with which we show up.
Yes. And that's, I feel, the entire basis of my coaching, which is obviously a little bit different from what you do. I am in more the fitness space with people that either have performance goals or they have health goals, and I do their nutrition.
Right.
But the main thing that I try to get across to everyone that works with me is you're not going to be excited. And that is something that people have a hard time with because it is exciting and fun. And we can all admit it. There's a reason fad diets are still around, even though they don't work and they don't stick. It's because it's fun to say, oh yes, I can only have this celery juice all day. This is all I'm eating. And everyone goes, oh my gosh, wow, that's so amazing. And I'm like, it's not. If you're not virtuous for only eating celery juice all day. But that being said, that is very attractive to people because they see this big flashy thing, and big and flashy must mean that it's big and effective for their health. And that's just not correct. So when I begin to work with people, the biggest thing about not being excited is I want to find the smallest thing that I can tweak in your life that will make the biggest impact and have the biggest rate of return. Because if I come in and I overhaul, you still have kids, you still have a job, you still have a life that you were living before you came and talked to me. And for me to have the audacity to come in and tell you to change that whole thing, not only should you find a different coach, but also nobody is ever going to stick with that. You can't teach an old dog new tricks all the time. You have to add things in that make sense to the life you're already living, especially a lot of the people I work with. I used to work with much higher level athletes, and I've actually kind of steered away from that more into either people that are competitive below a national level or just generally health enthusiastic. And what I've found is the people that are just generally health enthusiastic want these big overhauls, but yet the people that have done the foundational work and they're already competing at a very high level and they are elite. And when I used to work with those people, they wanted the smallest little things, and they didn't want anything interrupted. And there's something to that. There's something to not interrupting the way you exist in a massive way right all at once, even if you have to change a lot. Like there are people out there that need to change a lot. They're a smoker. They drink every single night. They don't sleep, and they have 5 kids, and they're so stressed out, and money is always an issue, and their marriage isn't great. And there's a million things that can happen. Life can suck, but to try to overhaul everything at once, you have to start with step 1. And I think that you kind of giving everyone that step 1, but also just kind of saying like, it's okay to spend time on this. Like you're worth it. And so many people don't have the time. And it's like, no, you have to have the time, because your health is going to make time for you if you don't make time for your health. And that's the horrible, horrible truth.
Well, and here's the thing. We are a society of quick fixes, but I say to my women in practice, I'm like, look, we are the flip phone of an iPhone generation. We don't have the same upgrades and updates in terms of body-based function. And that's okay. We are beautifully and intricately designed. We are primally programmed. That's a beautiful thing. Honestly, I think it's going to be what leads us back to the roots with which we've gotten so far away from. But the mind frame or the mindset is, well, if I do this, in a week from now, I'm going to be completely different and life's going to completely change. Probably not. You know, like I always like to say, I want to be transparent as possible with anyone that I work with. And I'm like, 4 months is going to change your life, but you have the rest of your life to change too. You know, and we have to keep our eye on that goal of, yes, these are going to be the small steps that reflectively I'm going to go, damn, I made a lot of changes in that amount of time. But they're not going to be so flamboyant that in the moment I'm like, holy shit, what a change, right? Like it is, like you said, it's the small, finite changes on a micro level that eventually become this macro picture. And that's so important. The simple things, it's the foundation. It's the basic that people overlook and underappreciate. And let me tell you, of all of the fancy protocols that I can put somebody on, they're the easy part. The hard part is getting somebody to understand and then really root themselves in foundational behaviors. You know, if you have hormone-based dysfunction and you're not cycling, that coffee and that alcohol is probably not going to be a good choice. I don't care how long we've been working together. Your body is still giving me feedback that that's not safe. Having the ability to shift perspective, to see life on a more macro level, but appreciate the micro.
You have like the best quotes ever. Like, this is amazing. I love this. Yeah. And I think something that maybe you agree, maybe you disagree.
Yeah.
I think people are a little bit mad that shit's not fair. Some people are going to get away with a lot more shit than you are. That's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, there are people we'll see like every single year when like Met Gala or fashion shows or fashion week or whatever comes around, I always get clients and they send me, you know, the pictures of like the supermodels, like eating pizza backstage and like whatever. And they're like, there's no way they eat this. And I'm like, or they're the genetic 1% freaks. And that's okay. It's okay to not be a genetic freak. We're not genetic freaks, because genetic freaks wouldn't be genetic freaks if everyone was a genetic freak. It's okay to look at the person next to you and be like, fuck that dude. I want to eat a burger, but I can't. And it's okay to feel that way, but you also have to move on and realize like that guy is not your problem. That guy's health is not your problem. Your health, he doesn't have to live in your body. You do. So are you going to be mad that it's not fair and like put yourself in timeout for being angry? No, like you should just accept that, okay, this is what I'm dealing with and these are my cards. So I can either manipulate the hand I was dealt to the best of my ability and enjoy my life, or I can be super pissed off for the next couple decades about the hand I was dealt. Like, I love the Kardashians. Everyone's like, oh, I hate the Kardashians. They're famous for nothing. Do I agree with every single thing they do? Absolutely not. Let's not like go there. My thing is, okay, so we're mad at them because they don't have any talent and they're billionaires, right? So I don't have that many talents, but I'm sitting in my apartment right now. Like, I don't have like tons of room in here. Like, so they did something different. They manipulated their situation to the best of their ability. Was their timing? Of course. Was their luck? Of course. Whatever happens, you have to play the hand you're dealt. And the best way you can play your hand is to look into your hand and go, what am I working with? And just as you said, like you can work with these things. Like this isn't, oh no, I can't look at my hand because I don't want to know because that's what I'm stuck with. That's not it. And do you feel that you get people that maybe are timid or afraid to even ask what might be wrong because they fear the answer? Or is it just people not really willing to take those extra steps?
It's really interesting because a lot of people are seeking something to be wrong, right? Like, oh my God, please tell me there is like some sort of landmine or minefield on my tests that really show what's going on. And I'm like, well, we're always going to find answers. The most interesting thing to me is like, sometimes I get really complicated cases and I'm like, okay, we have all of these symptoms and now I have your test. So I have data, I have biofeedback from the body. I hear what she's saying, but your symptoms and your data don't align, which means there's a lack of awareness somewhere in your life. You don't have the overgrowth that you thought that you had. You don't have the heavy metal toxicity you thought that you had, but you do have excessive deficiency. What drives excessive deficiency? Catabolism. What drives catabolism? Stress. So many people underappreciate what stress actually is, underappreciate the chronic presentation of it, and are constantly looking for these big signs, these big neon signs saying, fix me, like do this, go here. And sometimes that's just not how life works. We have also, to your point, bastardized health, right? So like we take health based on appearance, when in reality, most of the time, when you're dealing with a chronically ill patient, I was a chronically ill patient. I looked fine on the outside. Nobody understood the war that was raging on the inside of me. So many people look at people and they go, you look fine. You look healthy. What does that actually mean? Like, what does that mean? I might look healthy, but I don't feel healthy. Does healthy mean overly thin? Does healthy mean, what does healthy mean today? We've bastardized the meaning of health. When in reality, it's all about functionality. Feel good. Do I feel good when I wake up in the morning? Yes. Do I wake up without an alarm clock? Yes. Do I need caffeine as soon as I roll out of bed? Absolutely not. Is my energy maintained throughout the day? 100%. Do I go to bed at a good time and fall asleep without issue or without aid? Yes. Like that. And we could unpack that for an hour, right? Because there's all these signs that we look for that really reflect health. And those are just some of them. Can I sit down and eat something at the table without worrying about the combination? Yeah, I can. Like I can just appreciate my food for what it is, food, instead of obsessing over everything that I put in my mouth. We have this really unhealthy relationship with food, this unhealthy relationship with working out, this unhealthy relationship with appearance and aesthetics. We're constantly seeking to be something that we're not. Why don't we start celebrating what it is that we are and then enhancing it, elevating it, leveling it up? That's health.
Right. That definition of health, I feel like, why has no one said that? Why do people not know that? Right? Like that's scary. And I also think that I do work in the health industry and I will totally sarcastically be like, oh my gosh, I hate fitness. I hate fitness so much. And it's not that I hate fitness. Like I love what I do and I love my job. What I hate is it can get so overwhelming with, oh, well, you're a nutritionist. Well, you don't have like an 8-pack. Like you like kind of have abs, but like, I don't know. And it's like, I knew just as much about nutrition when I didn't have any abs at all as I do now.
Yep.
That isn't saying anything. And then when I was opening the gym, I was pretty damn thin because I couldn't eat because I was so stressed out. I was heavier after I was healthier. And that seems to just go to the wayside. And I also think that people have an obsession with perfection in presentation rather than perfection elsewhere, while also being so afraid to start working on a health journey because just like say everything you just listed and people are like, oh my gosh, like I don't resonate with any of that. Like, oh my gosh, you don't have to have every single box checked from day one. Like you didn't get here yesterday, right?
No,
you started this so long ago. And you said that in your story, this has been lifelong. This has not been 2 days ago. Taylor like got her shit together for the podcast and now she wakes up without an alarm. That is not the case. And this is also not finite, right? This isn't an end date. There are times in life where maybe you're really stressed out. Maybe something really horrible happens, God forbid. Maybe something is just off and you can't figure out what it is, and you haven't figured that out yet. So you have to move through it the best way you know how. You don't have to be perfect all the time to improve. You are an absolute product of all of the averages that you put in. So if on average, you're doing a pretty damn good job, I promise you it is worth so much more than saying, that's so intimidating to me. I don't think I can do any of that because I can't, I don't even know where to start. Don't worry about starting everything. Pick one thing. Where are you the shittiest at? Great place to start. Are you god awful at sleeping? You sleep 2 hours a night. It's your worst thing. That's where you need to start. And if you are pretty good about water, you drink 60 ounces a day instead of 100. Like, you probably don't need to improve your water intake as much as you need to improve your sleep. And just pick your biggest fish to fry. Do you have something that you feel aside from stress? Because I think that all of these factors, fill up that stress cup. Is there something that you can pinpoint that you think that people maybe most often present with when you're trying to look through their life and kind of with a fine tooth comb, figure out where this may be coming from? So some things that you see all the time.
Yeah. So most people don't pay attention to their environment. Most people don't pay attention to their home environment. Where are you spending all your time? Right? Is it a clean environment? Is it a healthy ecosystem? Everybody thinks about health in terms of their body, but people don't think about health in terms of their actual physical location and ecosystem, right? If you have somebody who's mold sensitive, I can't live I can't work, in a work building that has ventilation systems that haven't been cleaned, that has prior water damage. I know when people hear this and they're like, this is overwhelming. I'm like, it's a lot more overwhelming to feel like shit on a routine basis than it is to be aware of these things. Like, staying in hotels is a no-go, So I vet every place that I stay, even in the home that we're in now. Before we moved in, there was an ERMI test run to make sure that there wasn't mold blowing out of the vents. And if there was mold, we could take care of it. So environment is huge. The people that you're surrounded by in your environment, the colors of your environment, the decor, the clutter, the beautiful candles that people love from freaking Bath and Body Works because it's fall and pumpkin spice is a thing, killing you. I promise you, slowly but surely, you're inhaling shit that you shouldn't be inhaling, right? So a lot of people don't tend to or pay attention to their environment outside of, does it appeal to what my eye likes to look at? It's not functional all of the time for how we're feeling. I had a client several months ago where we were making progress and then all of a sudden we hit a wall. And I was like, it's not your protocols, okay? Your body is not shutting down because of protocols, right? Oh, and your dog's having seizures, okay? And you can't get off the couch and you're having 15 bowel movements a day that are liquid. It's your house. I need you to spend some time out of your house. And when we finally got to the place in the space where she removed herself from her house within a week, her bowel movements went back to 3 a day instead of 15. Her dog stopped having seizures. It was her environment. Upon testing, there was mold, toxic mold, that was killing her. There's no other way to put it. So people don't pay enough attention to their environment. And it's important to pay attention to your environment because even furniture, I always say traveling with me is the best and the worst because I'm going to be the first person that walks in the house and looks up and looks down and checks everything out. And if it doesn't check out, we're finding another place to stay. But at the same time, there's a gift to be offered on the back end of that. And that is, I feel good, right? Because there's this awareness of what I need to look for. And then there's an ability to speak up for what it is that I need if a need's not being met. And I think most people live their lives getting angry at others or themselves for not meeting needs that were never spoken.
Yes, that is beautiful. I could talk to you for 3 hours. You have brought so much to this. And I feel like now not only do people really understand the roundabout of these things and what goes into it, but they also have steps to take. And I think that's the most important thing because that was why I started the podcast, is because I found all of these things with information and all of these things being thrown at you. And then everyone goes, oh, okay, so what do I do though? What do you mean? Where do I go from here? And you do a phenomenal job. If you have any questions about this, go follow her on Instagram. I'm going to have her plug herself everywhere in a second, but I don't say this about every guest. I think this is a phenomenal person to follow. I really do. I think people need to be knowing these things. And where can people find you? Where can people get more of everything you have to say?
So the purpose of my platform is to educate, right? I want to provide as much free information as possible so people can take steps to change their life, right? Instagram is the primary platform that I spend time on. So at Tailored Wellbeing. I also have a website, taylorsappington.com. There's a 5-day free your gut challenge, free your gut challenge. I have freebies on the website too about constipation, about thyroid, about sleep. Go check those out. I mean, easy to integrate steps. Enroll yourself in the 5-day program. It's literally me sending you videos telling you how to change the things that you're doing in order to enhance the foundation of your life. info@taylorsappington.com is my email. But again, I spend a ton of time on Instagram. Yes, it's me. I answer every DM that comes in, or I try to at least. And I love interacting with community. Like, that's what this is all about, supporting people and meeting them where they're at.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Everything will be linked to Taylor below, and hopefully we will chat again soon, Taylor.
Yes, I would love it. Thank you so much for having me.